Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the dark side. I'm your host, Sherry. I hope you're all having a great January so far. Today, we've got a solved case out of Washington, D.C. A family is held hostage in their home and were terrorized the entire time. Ultimately, they are killed, and police have to hunt to find their killer. This case definitely needs a trigger warning since it involves the death of a child. My sources are in the description area. This is episode 140, The Case of the Savopoulos Family. This case takes us back to 2015. Let's go back for a moment. Hillary Clinton announced she would be running for president. Microsoft released Windows 10. British archaeologists discovered a mass grave from the Great Plague of London from the 1600s. The number one food trend was avocado toast. And in weird news from 2015, a man in Georgia saw an armadillo in his yard and fired at it with his 9mm handgun. As you may know, armadillos have armor-like shells. The bullet ricocheted and went through the back door of his mobile home, ultimately striking his 74-year-old mother-in-law who was sitting in a recliner. Luckily, she survived with minor injuries and no charges were filed. On May 14, 2015, large plumes of smoke were seen billowing out of a beautiful $4 million brick mansion in Woodley Park. This home sits in a beautiful upscale neighborhood in Washington, D.C. It's close to the Smithsonian National Zoo and about a 10-minute drive to the White House. The fire is bad and smoke is rolling out of the second and third floor of this house. Once the fire was extinguished, emergency services go inside and find the bodies of 3 adults and 1 child upstairs. They discover these folks didn't die in the fire. They were dead before the fire started. Who did this to this family? This home belongs to the Savopoulos family. Savas Savopoulos is a 46-year-old man who lives there. His wife, Amy, is 47 years old. They met in college and hit it off and began dating. They married in 1994 in a huge Greek wedding. At the time of our story, they just celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Savas is the CEO of American Iron Works. American Iron Works is a large-scale construction firm located in Hyattsville, Maryland. They built the FDA building in Washington, D.C., They helped build the 20,000-seat Verizon Center Sports Arena, which is now the Capital One Arena. American Iron Works was also praised for their restoration work at the Pentagon after the 9/11 attacks. Savas is the CEO of this company. He's a very busy man whose phone is going off 24 hours a day. He still made time for his family, and he also owned a martial arts studio. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of Maryland and his law degree from American University. But engineering would be his career as he loved coming up with innovative ideas. He loved traveling the world and opera music. He and his wife Amy were part of elite social circles and contributed to many nonprofit groups, so they were constantly photographed at events. They even donated $100,000 to the National Cathedral School. Amy is described as a supermom. Amy grew up in a military family and was moved all over the place as a child. She graduated from the University of Maryland with a bachelor's degree in economics. Amy spent a lot of time volunteering in their children's schools. Recently, my daughter and I made holiday gifts for all of her teachers. She's in middle school, so this took a lot of time and energy from me since she has so many teachers. So I'm exhausted just thinking about the time Amy spent volunteering in the schools and organizing fundraisers. Amy went as far as bringing in individual gingerbread house kits for all the students. She was crafty and had a love for children and helping others any way she could. Amy loved golf, tennis, boating, and taking hikes at nearby Rock State Park. She loved attending performing arts and visiting art galleries. She was also known for her lavish gatherings at her home. Savas and Amy have 3 children. 2 are teenage daughters, Abigail and Katerina, who are away at prestigious boarding schools. They're not even living at home during this time. Their youngest child, Philip, is 10 years old. Philip is a 4th grader at St. Albans School for Boys. Philip was an excellent student who was described as being wise beyond his years. He owned a go-kart, and this wasn't just a recreational thing for him or a hobby. Like, he had a coach and competed nationally, and he was sponsored. Philip had dreams of being a Formula One driver someday. Most F1 drivers get their start as kids who race go-karts, so Philip could have very well been a professional racer someday. He loved the NBA, and his favorite player was Kevin Durant. He was proud of his dad's Greek heritage. He loved Harry Potter. He was an amazing 10-year-old, and his older sisters doted on him. The whole family had gotten together recently to watch Finding Nemo, and I'm sure it's a bittersweet memory. Another person in our story is a woman by the name of Vera Figueroa. Vera is 57 years old. She is one of 2 housekeepers the family employed at their home. Vera had been working for the family for the last 4 years. The other housekeeper is a woman named Nellie Gutierrez. Nellie had been employed by the Savopoulos family for the last 20 years and introduced Vera to them. She told her she works for this lovely family and they are very generous and take good care of her. You should come to work with me there. So 4 years ago, Savas and Amy hired Vera. Vera is originally from El Salvador. Her plan was to come to the U.S. and work and send money home for her children and the rest of her family. She was putting money aside each week for her children's education. Nellie says that the Savopoulos family treated her and Vera like they were their family members and not just employees. She said Savas and Amy were very kind to them and good people to work for. On the day of our story, Vera is the housekeeper on duty. Nellie and her took turns, and today is Nellie's day off. They loved coming to the house to work every day. It was this beautiful mansion in a peaceful neighborhood with other mansions. The neighbor across the street was the ambassador of Australia. There's fancy cars and manicured lawns, a completely different sight than what the firefighters saw that day when they arrived, and smoke is rolling out of the upstairs windows. On May 13th, 2015, sometime in the afternoon, someone broke into this family's home. A boot print was found on the French door. At the time of the break-in, Amy is home today along with her 10-year-old son, Philip, and their housekeeper, Vera. The reason Philip is home from school is because he was sick. Amy had taken him to the doctor earlier that day. That afternoon, Amy was out taking her daily short walk around the neighborhood while Vera stayed at the house with Philip. It's believed when Amy was out taking this walk, the intruder went inside. What unfolds over the next 20 or so hours is a nightmare. It had to have been before 3 p.m. because Vera was supposed to get off work at 3 and she's still there. This intruder now has Amy, Vera, and Philip held hostage. At 4:25 p.m., Amy's phone rings and it's the family's dog sitter calling to confirm an upcoming appointment. The dog sitter said Amy sounded tired and under the weather, which was unusual. At 5:30 p.m., Savas is at his martial arts studio over an hour away in Chantilly, Virginia. He is in the middle of preparing for the grand opening ceremony when he receives a call from Amy. She tells him, "Hey, could you drop what you're doing and come home? I really want to go out with my friends tonight, but Philip is sick. I need you to come home and watch him." Savas is thinking, okay, this is weird. I'm kind of in the middle of something important here. But he gets in his car and he drives home. Amy is likely tied up in a chair and being threatened to make this phone call. She couldn't tell him, "Call 911, I'm being held hostage." Savas arrives home at 7 o'clock p.m. The detectives believe that when he walked through the door, he was attacked and savagely beaten. Amy and Vera were tied up in one room. We know this because they found duct tape on the legs of the chairs, and Philip was tied up in a different room. At 9 o'clock p.m. that night, the family's other housekeeper, Nellie, who was off that day, receives a phone call from Savas. It went to voicemail, so he left a message. He tells her not to worry about coming to work tomorrow. He said Amy is sick and Vera is going to spend the night. Nellie has worked for this family for the last 20 years. She said her and Vera both have never spent the night there, so she thought it was odd, But this was Savas talking to her, and it didn't seem like anything was wrong. She trusted him and had no reason not to believe him. He's been her boss for 20 years. He also tells her that Vera's cell phone is dead and she doesn't have a charger, so don't bother calling or texting her. Again, odd, but Savas sounds fine. Nellie has no idea that Savas, Amy, Vera, and Philip are being held hostage. I've listened to this voicemail and it's incredibly sad because Savas sounds so calm, but you hear screaming in the background, which everyone believes is Philip since it sounds like a child. Nellie may have thought it was the television on in the background. You hear Savas in the voicemail tell Nellie to text him back and let him know that she received this message. The whole thing is super distressing to listen to. A lot of people have brought up the two dogs. The family had two Chesapeake Bay retrievers named Bear and Ginger. Friends say these dogs were super calm and gentle. If they did bark when the intruder came in, he likely threatened Amy to put the dogs in the kennel. At some point that evening, Savas calls his home security system company. He asks them where the security video is stored and how he could access it. We know the killer is telling him, get on the phone with the security company and find out where these videos are stored so they could be deleted. The weird part is that the home's sophisticated security system was never triggered this whole time. The phone lines had been cut, so that may have had something to do with it. At 8:00 p.m., Savas texts his personal assistant, a 28-year-old man by the name of Jordan. He tells Jordan that a package will be at American Ironworks tomorrow morning. I need you to pick it up and bring it to my house. At 9:14 p.m., a call is placed by Amy to the local Domino's Pizza. She orders 2 pizzas and gives them her credit card number. She gives Domino's specific instructions about the delivery. She tells them that she is home with a very sick child. Just ring the doorbell and leave the pizza on the front porch. I'll have a cash tip in an envelope sitting in front of the door. Savas calls the CFO of American Ironworks. He tells them, I need you to go to the bank when it opens tomorrow and withdraw $40,000 for me. I need it all in cash. Jordan will come by in the morning and pick it up from you. The CFO doesn't want to pry, but this was an unusual request. Savas tells him it's for an equipment auction and that he would be attending that day. Many auctions are cash-only places, and this seems legit. Even if it's not really for an equipment auction, his boss asked him to do something and it's his money. The CFO does exactly what Savas tells him to do as soon as the bank opens. Savas emailed him a letter on his American Ironworks letterhead that the CFO printed out to take with him. It's hard to think about Savas during this time because he likely has a gun to his head while he's doing all of this, or he's being told that the others will be hurt if you screw this up. The letter reads, May 15th, 2015. Bank of America, this serves as my authorization to withdraw $40,000 in cash from American Ironworks checking account. Please hand the cash to our CFO when he presents this letter. If you would like to contact me to confirm, I can be reached on my cell phone number. Thank you, Savopoulos. Now, Bank of America typically wouldn't allow this, but they saw it was Savas and he's one of the best clients around. No one wanted to question it. Everyone was so trusting of Savas that they just did what he told them to do and didn't ask any questions. That says a lot about his character. Anything he says doesn't raise a red flag. Now, during these brief phone conversations with others outside of the house, Savas and Amy had to remain calm. They couldn't alert the person on the phone that anything was wrong. Just to jump ahead and give you a better idea of what is going on in this house, the evidence found at the scene showed that Savas, Amy, Vera, and 10-year-old Philip were brutally tortured during this time. Savas was beaten with a baseball bat. Amy and Vera had severe injuries consistent with being beaten and strangled. All were tied up. The savagery of this crime is unbelievable. At 9:56 a.m., Amy texts Nellie and tells her again, make sure you don't come in today. Back to this money. So Savas had given his assistant, Jordan, instructions to pick up the money from American Iron Works. He said to drive it to my house and leave it in the garage on the driver's seat of the car. He said, do not knock or ring the doorbell because I'm on an important conference call. Around this same time, Vera's husband Bernardo and stepdaughter are concerned because she didn't come home from work last night, plus her phone is going straight to voicemail. Bernardo and his daughter drive over to the Savopoulos' house and knock on the door. They said they knew immediately something was wrong. It was super quiet and still. Something seemed off. Bernardo knocked on the door and didn't hear a sound, except they did hear the sound of furniture being moved or perhaps a chair scooching across a hardwood floor. When he got back to the car, he told his daughter that he felt like there was someone inside, but they didn't want to answer the door. Just moments later, his cell phone rings and it's Savas calling. He quickly answers and asks Savas, "Where is my wife?" He said Savas apologized, saying, "I'm really sorry." He said Vera went with my wife and son to the hospital. Bernardo asks him which hospital they're at. Savas tells him he will get that info and get back to him. Bernardo and his daughter then leave, and Savas never calls him back. At 10:26 a.m., Savas' assistant Jordan sends him a text that reads, "Package delivered." At 12 o'clock p.m., some workers at the neighbor's house saw a black man with dreadlocks open the garage. He was wearing a hard hat and a fluorescent safety vest, so they didn't think much of it. This neighborhood always has contractors around doing work, so they figured he was just another contractor. At 1:20 p.m., flames and smoke were seen coming from the home. The fire department received a bunch of calls about this house. They rushed over there and put out the fire. Inside, they discover the bodies of 4 people. They discover these folks did not die in the fire. They were dead before the fire started, except Vera had a slight pulse but died shortly after they arrived. One investigator said it appeared like a bloodbath upstairs. 46-year-old Savopoulos died of sharp force injuries and strangulation. The sharp force injuries were presumed to be done with a samurai sword. Savas had a real samurai sword he owned, and the killer used it on him. He also had a severe injury to the back of his head consistent with a baseball bat. Savas was likely tied to the chair while being strangled and stabbed. Because remember, he is trained in martial arts. He could definitely kick someone's ass if he needed to. He would have fought back, but if he's tied to a chair, he's not able to. Evidence showed Savas was restrained using zip ties. The others were restrained to chairs using duct tape. 47-year-old Amy died of sharp force injuries. 57-year-old Vera died of sharp force injuries and strangulation. But they found that before she died, she suffered a heart attack. This poor woman was literally scared to death. 10-year-old Philip was found tied to the bed. He died from thermal injuries in the fire, but evidence showed that he was tortured before his death because he had multiple stab wounds. From what I can tell from the reports that I've read, these stab wounds weren't fatal, but were more of a torture technique to get the adults to comply. I guess every time they acted out, Philip was stabbed. The fire was started using an accelerant in Philip's bedroom on the queen-size mattress where he was tied up. Then the accelerant was also poured on each of the adults. A wooden baseball bat was found. This bat was a gift to Philip from his grandfather and even had his name engraved in it. Well, Vera's DNA was found on the handle of the bat. This means at some point, this woman, who was a hero if I've ever seen one, picked up this bat and tried to fight back. She was likely trying to protect Philip. The only things missing from the home are all of their cell phones and Amy's Porsche. Their killer escaped and is now on the run. The good news is he's driving a flashy blue Porsche, so it won't be hard to miss him. It's not like they're looking for a silver Ford Taurus. This is a Porsche, and it isn't too common. Just to pause for a moment, this killer came into their home and took everyone hostage for over 20 hours. He demanded $40,000, which is nothing to Savas. Savas is a multimillionaire. I'm positive he was telling him, take anything you want. Savas would have given him everything he owned to let his son and Amy and Vera live. None of the fancy artwork in the home was taken, none of Amy's expensive handbags or jewelry. During Savas' autopsy, the medical examiner found $125 in cash in his pocket. Savas and Amy cooperated with their killer. They made phone calls. Savas typed out a letter to the bank. They came up with excuses so no one would suspect that they were being held, but it still wasn't enough. They did everything their killer wanted them to do, and they still died. It's so sad to know that Philip was being held in a different bedroom from the adults. They can't see what's going on. They can only hear him. Amy's blue Porsche is located 13 miles away in New Carrollton, Maryland. It's found engulfed in flames in a church parking lot. They must have just missed the person. Surveillance footage showed a black man with dreadlocks walking away from the car, but it was grainy and you could only see him from behind. The first thing the police have to do is make contact with the two older daughters. They want to make sure they are okay and they haven't been taken. They are found at their boarding school, so of course they're safe, but they are given the news that the rest of their family is dead. Investigators get to work preserving evidence inside the home and trying to recover fingerprints or anything that can lead them to the killer. They find a Domino's pizza box inside the bedroom where the adults were being held. They see on the pizza box label that it was purchased last night. Inside the box, they find a half-eaten slice of pizza. They swab DNA from this pizza slice and upload it to the CODIS database, and they have an instant match. They also find a hard hat in the garage with a hair in it. The hair DNA was a match to the DNA on the pizza. The DNA belongs to a man named Darren Wint. Darren Wint is a 34-year-old man who is a certified welder and a former employee of American Iron Works. Darren is originally from Guyana and moved to the United States in 2000 when he was 20. He has an extensive criminal history. According to reporting by CBS News, he was arrested 3 times for assault in 2006 and 2007. He served a 10-month sentence in New York and then convicted of assaulting a girlfriend in Maryland in 2009. In 2010, he pled guilty to malicious destruction of property after he allegedly broke into a woman's apartment, stole a television, vandalized her car, and threatened to kill her infant daughter. Also in 2010, he was arrested for carrying a 2-foot-long machete and a BB gun outside the American Iron Works headquarters, but the weapons charges were dropped after he pled guilty to possessing an open container of alcohol, which makes 0 sense to me. It seems like every time he got charged with something, he got a slap on the wrist. Darren is estranged from his father, but he does have 2 brothers, and we'll get to them shortly. Darren worked at American Iron Works from 2003 to 2005, and then he was fired. It's crazy that he hasn't been employed there in 10 years and still went after the CEO. An arrest warrant is issued for Darren Wint. They check his dad's house in Maryland since he occasionally will stay there, but he's not there right now. Police talk to Nellie, the other housekeeper. They talk to Vera's husband, Bernardo, and they talk to Jordan, who is Savas' personal assistant. Each one tells them about the weird phone calls and text messages that they received. Jordan tells them about the $40,000 money drop-off Savas instructed him to do. Savas indicated that it was for an equipment auction. Jordan is initially a person of interest because they seized his phone and found a photo that he had taken of the money, and he texted it to his girlfriend. He was basically showing off what his boss had him carrying for him. Yeah, it's a weird thing to do, but he is 28 and never had that much money in his possession before. I'm not saying it was right, but it wasn't the worst thing ever. I'm sure Jordan feels bad about it now, knowing that this was ransom money. He also made some contradictory statements to the police. Once he said the car in the garage was locked, and then he changed his story and said it was unlocked. They check out Jordan's social media, and for the last couple months, he was flashing pictures of inside sports cars and inside Savis's Land Rover, basically saying he has the coolest job in the world. In one Instagram post, he shared a picture of a car steering wheel saying, "My office has leather-bound seats and smells of mahogany." Everyone is asking what he does for a living now. He says he drives for a CEO. Everyone's like, damn, is he hiring? Jordan used to be an employee at the racetrack where Savis brought his son Philip to practice. They hit it off, and Savis ended up hiring him as his personal assistant to run errands and do odd jobs. Jordan does end up getting cleared, but I feel like his reputation was damaged after people found out he was showing off the money to his girlfriend. Even though he thought at the time it was an innocent thing to do, he was actually holding blood money and didn't know it. So what has Darren Wint been up to for the last few days? We learned he ditched the Porsche in the church parking lot, he set it on fire, and walked away. He goes to Brooklyn, New York to visit his girlfriend Vanessa, and he tells her, "Guess what? I just won the lottery." He tells her he's going to take her on a shopping spree. He buys her a fancy dinner, shoes, a new cell phone, plus he gives her money to apply to her credit card. Darren's brother-in-law said Darren pulled out a wad of cash right in front of him. He's just flashing this money around like he really won the lottery. Vanessa would later testify that they were in bed that night and a news report came across the TV screen and it showed Darren's face, and she jumped up and looked at him and said, "What did you do?" Darren needs to travel back to the Maryland, Washington, D.C. area because his girlfriend is done with him now. According to reporting by USA Today, Darren used $1,000 of the cash to take a cab from Brooklyn, New York, back to Washington, D.C. He paid for tolls and gave the driver a generous tip. He didn't have a car anymore because the van he was driving before the murders he set on fire. That's the third fire he's been responsible for in 1 week. Darren and some family members are pulled over on May 21st, 1 week after the murders. There was 2 women in the car with him and a box truck being driven behind him with his brother and his cousin inside. He's telling people he won the lottery, so everyone wants to be around Darren right now, apparently. His brother would say Darren was on his way to turn himself in. He even produced a paper that had an address to the police station written on it. I don't think that Darren was on his way to turn himself in. That's just my personal opinion. I think that's what he was telling some folks, though. Darren is placed under arrest for the kidnappings and murders of Savis, Amy, Vera, and Philip. They found he still had $10,000 in cash on him. There were 2 iPhone 6s on him, which belonged to the victims, plus an iPad. I don't know if the iPad belonged to one of the victims or if he purchased it after the murders. Police learned that Darren had some interesting Google searches during his time on the run. I know you guys love the Google searches, so here we go. How to beat a lie detector test. Top 10 hideout cities for fugitives. Luxury cars. How to reset an iPhone 6. Countries with no U.S. extradition treaty. Extradition laws in the U.S. The evidence we have tying Darren to the crime is his DNA on the pizza crust. That's the smoking gun. Plus, his hair was found in a hard hat in the garage, and another hair was found in Philip's bed. Darren was using social media all day, every day, but he didn't log on in the 22 hours the family was being held hostage. Darren's lawyer is a public defender who represented him in the past. He said his client is very gentle and wouldn't harm a soul. He said his client couldn't possibly be guilty because he doesn't even like pizza. If he was going to order food, he wouldn't order pizza. I mean, case closed. The guy doesn't like pizza, right? It wouldn't be until September 2018, almost 3 years after the murders, that Darren would have his day in court. Darren's defense team argues that it wasn't Darren there that day. It was his brothers, instead, who orchestrated all of this. According to WUSA-TV News, he testified that his brother Daryl had lured him to the house with the promise of a job painting and drywalling. He said when he got there, Daryl gave him a piece of pizza and then asked him to help empty the house of belongings. Darren said he refused and walked out of the house, never realizing the family was being held hostage upstairs. So says he was there, but he just ate some pizza and left, even though he doesn't like pizza. His brother Daryl said, "This wasn't me. He didn't have anything to do with this. He provided alibis." Darren's other brother, who they tried to blame, isn't involved because he was a construction site supervisor on the job that day and had really tight alibis, but the defense is trying hard to involve him. The defense also involved Jordan, who is Savos's assistant. They are trying to pin it on him too due to his inconsistencies and the photo he took of the money. I feel like the defense is just trying to pin this on anybody except their client. Vanessa, who is Darren's girlfriend, was granted immunity for testifying against him. She testified about the large spending spree that he took her on. On October 25th, 2018, Darren is found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder, 4 counts of kidnapping, 1 count of first-degree burglary, extortion, arson, and first-degree theft. The judge laid it on him hard. Not only did he kill 4 people, but one of them was a 10-year-old little boy. She told him his actions were incomprehensible, atrocious, and cruel. She said this is the most heinous crime ever committed in this city. Darren Wint was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He appealed, of course, in 2022, but it was denied. Darren was in that house alone with that family and their housekeeper, but former prosecutor Deborah Hines told WUSA-TV that because Darren worked at the American Iron Works company years ago, she said there has to be some connection to someone that Darren knows that's working there now that was able to give the details to know about the money and that they could get the money delivered to the house. I have to agree with her. I feel like someone else is involved too. Maybe not Darren's brothers, as he indicated, but someone who may have seen the family more recently. Darren hadn't worked there in 10 years. It looks like the 2 older daughters, at least one of them, have welcomed children into the world. I saw a few photos of small children on their social medias. One photo was of a little baby, and it said, "Welcome to the world, Savos Phillips Savopoulos," which is amazing. He is named after his granddad and uncle. Savos and Amy would have been amazing grandparents, and Philip would be 20 years old today and maybe an F1 driver by now. The Savopoulos' beautiful home was demolished in 2017. A new luxury home was built there and is currently on the market for $8.5 million. Vera's daughter said that she only sees the property as a graveyard. After living in poverty in El Salvador, Vera worked hard to provide for her family, and her efforts paid off. She was putting away money each week for her children's education. They both finished college in El Salvador. Her son is an engineer, and her daughter is a supply manager at a hospital. I know their mom would be so proud. Rest in peace to Vera, Savos, Amy, and Philip. My heart is with their families. That's it for this week, and I'll see you all again soon. Take care, and much love to you all.